Shortly before receiving Miracle Principle 28, in the very beginning of the text, Helen had a powerful spiritual experience that introduced a new term into the course's teaching. And that term was revelation. So here's what happened. It starts with Helen, according to Jesus, engaging, quote, at the visionary level in a process of denying fear. The visionary level, I think, is just a reference to the perceptual level, in a process of denying fear. And that led to what she called experiences at the visionary level. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any details about how she denied fear or what the experiences were that resulted. What we do know, though, is that all of that leads to her writing this beautiful line, which goes like this: Lord, I will leave my desire to help him in your hands. If you will tell me what to do, I will do it. Now, the him here refers to Bill. She has this strong desire to help Bill. You probably can relate. Have you ever had that desire just to help someone? But she does not want to help Bill, in this case, in her way. I think we all know that our way of helping is sometimes not all that helpful. So she places her desire to help Bill in God's hands, saying that if he will just tell her how he thinks Bill can best be helped, she'll do it. She'll go along with the plan. But actually, what I said just a minute ago was not quite what she wrote. She had intended to write at the end, I will do it. But instead, she wrote, I will to do it. And she said she didn't intend to insert the word to. It just happened while she was writing. So this is how it actually read. Lord, I will leave my desire to help him in your hands. If you will tell me what to do, I will to do it. It's a small change, but it makes a big difference. Before, she had a desire to help, and she was willing to comply with what God said about how she could help. She would let him drive the bus. But by writing, I will to do it, she was going further. Now her desire became one with God's will. All that he willed in this situation was her will too. So saying, I will to do it, it suggests more than merely complying with God's will. It suggests uniting with his will so that her will and his will are one. They want the exact same thing. And then Helen wrote that this simple change in wording had, quote, a terrific impact on her. Here's what she said. The impact of this was incredibly intense, like a great burst of unexpected clarity. It was briefly so compelling that it seemed as though there was nothing else at all. The whole world just disappeared. When it faded out, there was no after effect except a dim sense of wonder, which also faded out, though a trifle slower. Then Jesus told her to write nothing else that evening, to take no more dictation. He apparently wanted her just to kind of sit in the afterglow. He said they would pick up the course, her taking dictation, again in the morning. And he then explained that, quote, that kind of experience is at the revelation level, not the visionary level, which is different, but not by any means out of accord. So different, it's a little vague what he's saying by different. Maybe it means different than the visionary level. I think it probably means different than what the course's emphasis has been, which is on miracles. This is the very first reference to the word revelation in Helen's notes and in the course. And it comes from Helen having an experience of revelation, or at least an experience at the revelation level. And that naturally raises the question, what is revelation? In the Christian tradition, I think most of us know revelation is God revealing himself, maybe through intermediaries, revealing himself to humanity, especially through scripture, right? We think of scripture as a revelation from God. In the Course, though, revelation is God revealing himself to you in direct experience. So it's different than imparting teachings. It's a direct experience of God that he is revealing to you. It's an experience beyond the subject-object separation that's inherent in all perception. So it's an experience in which there's no perception. There's no sensory input, no sights, no sounds at all. It's just pure union with God, pure formless love. Jesus calls it a little bit later intensely personal, which to me suggests that God has united with you at the deepest, most interior, most personal level. And there's nothing else. As Helen says, the whole world just disappears. Now, as an interesting reference point, Jesus says that there are some similarities with the experience of an orgasm. Great intensity, deeply personal, the whole world disappears. But he implies that an orgasm is just the dimmest shadow of something that's beyond the ability of these conscious minds to encompass. In fact, he calls revelation an experience of not the conscious mind, but the superconscious, which means the above conscious, that which transcends the conscious mind. And he adds that it is, quote, actually not translatable into conscious content at all. Also, in contrast to an orgasm, Jesus says, quote, sex frequently involves lack of love, but revelation is purely a love experience. And then he adds, physical closeness cannot achieve this. So it sounds like an experience of extreme closeness with God, intensely personal closeness, pure love. What that all means is that revelation, you could say, is the supreme experience. In normal parlance, we would probably call it the mystical experience, but I think more properly, it's the summit of all mystical experience, because a lot of what we call mystical experiences don't rise to the level of what Jesus is talking about here. Perhaps, in many cases, you may see a divine radiance in all things around you. Well, in this level of mystical experience, you don't see anything around you. All sensory input is gone. And it really accords more with what has been called the introvertive mystical experience, to get a little technical. This is a term coined 65 years ago. And it's defined as an inward focused, transcendent state where an individual completely detaches from external sensory inputs, ordinary thoughts, and ego identity, resulting in an experience of pure oneness with the divine. That's a pretty good fit for what Helen and Jesus are describing here. I think every living thing somewhere inside yearns for this experience. And on the spiritual path, we tend to hold it, to the extent we have some understanding of it, in the very highest regard. But notice that Jesus has said that this is different from the Course's emphasis, even though not out of accord. Doesn't that seem kind of odd? If revelation is the highest experience, why would it be different than the Course's emphasis. If revelation is the highest experience, why wouldn't it be the Course's emphasis? Why wouldn't it be the central emphasis? Why wouldn't this be a course in revelation, a course in gaining and holding that supreme state of consciousness? Jesus is now going to answer that question. So first he says, quote, miracles come from the below conscious, and then in parentheses, subconscious level. Revelations come from the above conscious, and then in parentheses, super conscious level. The idea here is that there are three levels of the mind, with the conscious mind sandwiched in between the other two levels, one above the conscious and one below the conscious. And the idea is that with miracles, miracle impulses, the impulse to express love, expressions of love being the main definition of miracles in the Course, these impulses stream into the conscious mind from below, from the deepest level of the subconscious. And elsewhere, Jesus calls that the miracle level. So the miracle level is way below the conscious mind. And from that miracle level come miracle impulses that enter, when we allow them, enter the conscious mind and give us that urge to express love, to in some way be giving, helpful, loving towards another. Revelation, in turn, comes from the superconscious. Super here meaning above, from the supreme level. So revelation is a case in which the conscious mind unites with the level above perception, the level of heavenly knowledge, the level of God. Both experiences, miracles and revelation, are highly extolled in the Course, here and elsewhere, and granted great significance. But we still don't know why this is a course in miracles, not a course in revelation. So now Jesus explains. He says, miracles are a way of earning release from fear. Revelation induces a state in which fear has already been abolished. Miracles are thus a means, and revelations are an end. In this sense, they work together. So remember, revelation is purely a love experience. And because love and fear are incompatible, this means revelation is an experience without any fear whatsoever, not even the faintest echo of fear. And therefore, Jesus implies, to enter this state, you need to be ready for a complete absence of fear, for a state in which no one can even imagine what fear might be. How do you get yourself ready for that? You give miracles. Miracles, again, as we so often say here at the Circle, are mainly defined in the Course as expressions of love, as an interpersonal expression of love from one person to another. And the more you express love, the more you chase fear from your mind. And the more your mind is free of fear, the more ready you become for a state in which fear has already been abolished, a state in which fear can't even be conceived of. And that's why Jesus says miracles are a means and revelations are an end. One is where you're ultimately going. The other is how you get there. Now, as it turns out, Helen and Bill have very different relationships with revelation. This will be a lot of the subject of what I'll be talking about. And that different relationship is what Jesus speaks to now. He says that Bill, quote, is quite capable of miracles already, but he is still too fearful for revelations. So he has enough fear in him that he's not ready to experience that fear-free state. And then Jesus turns to Helen. He says to her, tell Bill that your propensity for revelation, which is very great, is the result of a high level of past communion. Its transitory nature comes from the descent into fear, which has not yet been overcome. Now, that sounds a little impenetrable, but I think I can explain it. In contrast to Bill, Helen has a great propensity for revelation. We just saw her reporting having an experience that Jesus called at the revelation level. And she acquired this propensity in some distant past where she had a high level of communion, and that has to mean communion with God. This can't help but make one think about the priestess. If you know about the priestess, this was an apparent past life of Helen's that she had inner visions of, where she had what sounds like constant communion with God. In one of Helen's descriptions, she says about the priestess, she never really left God's side, and she remained peacefully certain of his presence there in the room with her. So, in that life, if we're to take that as a literal memory, and maybe many others, who knows, Helen was in a place of having a high level of communion with God. But then, Jesus says, at some point after all that, she had a descent into fear. And this is mentioned more than once by Jesus. He called this in another place, quote, an interval of darkness, in which she had apparently long centuries of descending into ego, descending into fear. So she has both of these things in her past, right? This high level of communion, this descent into fear, this interval of darkness. And both of those pasts are within her now. And she's caught between them. So, because of her high level of past communion, she, in her life as Helen, can touch that state of revelation. But because of her descent into fear, those moments, those experiences are transitory. She's quickly dragged back down into the state of fear, even extreme fear. And as a result, she's constantly swinging between love and fear, even between revelation all the way at the top and terror. So that's Helen's situation. Bill's situation is different. He is suspended in between those two places. Jesus says, quote, his own suspended state mitigates both extremes. So Bill can't rise to the highest. He doesn't sink to the lowest. He's suspended in the middle. I think a lot of us can relate to Bill. These wild swings up and down. We're kind of just cruising along in the middle, wondering why we can't get all the way up there. But glad we aren't as terrified as some people around us. So their two cases seem so different, don't they? And they would certainly be viewed differently in a spiritual setting. In spirituality, we idolize people like Helen, right? If you can report that you have had exalted states, you immediately get our attention. So just for a second, imagine that Helen had taken a different path in life. Imagine that she had said, forget this whole university thing. I'm going to be a spiritual leader. So she rents a stage and she announces, I have remembered many ancient lives from the very dawn of time. I was once a holy priestess who spent all day communing with God and calling down blessings on everyone who came for my prayers. I never left my inner sanctum where God was constantly there with me. People would travel from distant lands to seek help at my shrine. And because of my many lives spent in a high level of communion, I can enter those states now. I have experiences of the very highest nature where the whole world just disappears and I enter an intensely personal state of pure, unbounded love, a state that can't be described in words. Now, based on all that we've seen, that's all true of Helen, right? So, what if she had embarked on this different career and made those claims publicly? Do you think she would gain a following? I suspect she probably would. We spiritual students cannot get enough of that stuff, right? We love that. Once she tells the story, if you heard it, you'd be telling that story to your friends, right? And telling them where the YouTube is. In our spiritual space, reports of experiencing higher states function much like having an MD functions in the medical realm, right? It gives you instant credentials, gives you a kind of license to practice. It tells people that they should come to you to learn how to reach the same place themselves, or at least they should come to you to experience what pours off of you. At least they can warm themselves by your fire. We also know that spiritual audiences treat the Helen types very differently than the Bill types. Bill, after all, has no exalted states to report. But what's so interesting is that Jesus treats them the same. He doesn't exalt Helen, although he clearly speaks highly of this great propensity that she has. Okay. And he doesn't degrade Bill. In fact, he gives them the exact same way forward. And the basis for that sameness lies in the key importance of miracles. So Jesus now returns to talking about how miracles and revelation relate to each other. Here's what he says. Revelation induces only experience. Miracles, on the other hand, induce interpersonal action. So let me just step back for a second here. Imagine you're hearing some spiritual teaching, and the teacher says, revelation induces pure experience. Miracles, on the other hand, induce action. Which one sounds better, right? We know which one sounds better. Like action. Oh, I need to do nothing, right? It's all about experience. But then Jesus says, quote, in the end, these, referring to miracles, are more useful. In the end, miracles are more useful because of their impersonal nature. Now, I'll get to the impersonal part in a second, but what an interesting passage, right? No one would guess that after saying revelation induces experience and miracles induces action, no one would guess that he would say miracles are the useful ones now, more useful than revelation. How is that possible? How can simply expressing love interpersonally be more useful than the supreme experience in which the world disappears and God reveals himself to us in an intensely personal way? So the explanation, as I pointed out, is that miracles are more useful because of their impersonal nature. Impersonal, that's the first use of this word in the course. It does appear a few more times. It's kind of an important word in the first chapter of the text. What he means by talking about the impersonal nature of miracles is that miracles show no personal preference. They don't say, well, I favor you more than somebody else. So if you're giving a miracle truly, even if you're giving an expression of love to the person in front of you, the sentiment behind that expression, the love behind it, does not really single that person out. Rather, the sentiment, the love, values everyone equally. So that's what impersonal means. I've looked at that, the meaning of that, quite a few times. But Jesus doesn't really explain why something impersonal is more useful now than something intensely personal. So I think we can only guess here. My guess is that perhaps in our current state, the intensely personal can pull us too much into the interior, too much away from others. Perhaps it can identify us too strongly with the strictly personal rather than identifying us with everyone. So maybe it just pulls us too much into ourselves, given how intensely personal it is. But that's just speculation. Jesus does not really elaborate here, at least enough for me to pick up on his intent with confidence. But now he goes on. And again, he prioritizes miracles. He says, quote, in this phase of learning that both Helen and Bill were in, that I think we're all in, working miracles is more valuable because freedom from fear, talking about revelation there, cannot be thrust upon you. The experience cannot last. So for now, working miracles is actually more valuable than revelation. Why? Because the freedom from fear that is inherent in revelation can't be thrust upon you. Either, like Helen, your fear will simply not allow you to have revelation because it is so completely free of fear, or like Helen, your fear will drag you down from those moments of revelation so that they cannot last. Either way, your fear gets in the way of revelation. And that's why miracles are so important now. And so now Jesus comes to his big conclusion. He says, quote, miracles are the essential course of action. And he emphasized action for both of you. They will strengthen him, strengthen Bill, and stabilize you, stabilize Helen. So Helen and Bill, as we have seen, have this very different relationship with the experience that is the goal of all our journeying. We cannot put down the experience of revelation. We are all of our laboring, all of our travel through or along, you could say, the carpet of time is to get to and stay in that experience. But Helen and Bill have a very different relationship with this end goal, with the summit of the mountain that they are climbing. Yet, despite this very different relationship, they have the same essential course of action to give miracles, to give interpersonal expressions of love. Both of them need to focus on, you could say, taking loving action. This loving action is not there so they can pile up points in heaven. I think we know that. It's there, at least in large part, for the psychological effect it has on them. As I've said, as we know, love is incompatible with fear. The Course says there is no fear in perfect love. And so, if Helen and Bill were to follow this course of action, as they would give love throughout each day, the love in those acts shines away the fear in their minds. As a result, they feel less and less anxious, form of fear. They feel increasingly secure, a lack of fear. Their self-doubt falls away. They stop looking over their shoulder, waiting for their just desserts to catch up with them. They, in fact, become like Mrs. Albert, if you know what Jesus says about her. This is in Cameo 9 in the CE. He said she is working miracles every day because she knows who she is. And then later he said she is not afraid because she knows she is protected. So in this scenario, Helen and Bill become like Mrs. Albert. They're working miracles every day. They are not afraid. They know they are protected. They know who they are. As a result, Bill becomes strengthened, as Jesus said. His fear drops away. He feels stronger, more secure. And now he's ready for the experience of revelation in which all fear is absent. And as Jesus says, Helen becomes stabilized. She no longer feels pulled down to extreme states of fear. As a result, the balloon of her mind, you could say, is free to rise up to heavenly spaces without getting dragged back down. So now she can stay there in those spaces more and more. All of this, I think, is not what we expect Jesus to say. If Helen had put herself forth as the modern day priestess, adored for her ability to stride the heights of heaven, would we dream of telling her, you know, what you really need to do is focus on expressing love to other people every day, all day? Because if you do that, you'll be able to stride those heights for longer and longer at a stretch. We wouldn't say that to her. If Bill was there, let's say, sitting at her feet, hoping to be her someday or be like her, would we imagine saying to Bill, you really need to learn how to express love to others every day, all day? Then you'll be free of the fear that blocks you from those mountaintop experiences that Helen has. I don't think we'd say that to Bill. I think we'd tell Bill to just be still and do nothing and meditate more and learn how to abide in presence. Yet, what I said we wouldn't say to them is exactly what Jesus has just said to them. How interesting. We can so idolize the Helen types, can't we? And her gifts were amazing. We are all benefiting from those gifts. But as we idolize those types, we tend to know how it goes. So often their egos get puffed up. And then we find out somewhere down the road that as human beings, they're not very good. We find out they engaged in abuse and corruption. We find out, in essence, that the ability to tune into those higher states was not enough. It was not enough to transform their whole mind into pure goodness. It turned out, in so many cases, and we've all heard the cases, that one ability, that apart from that one ability, they were basically like the rest of us. So the Course is not one of those paths that is all about pursuing the experience of revelation. It is a course in miracles, a course in expressions of love. Therefore, you could say this course's keynote is pure interpersonal goodness. Acts of genuine love flowing through us from the miracle level of our subconscious. That's how you climb up the spiritual ladder. If you want to be free of fear and anxiety, look on everything with love. If you want to have more experiences of God, act toward everyone with love. It is this interpersonal goodness that draws us up the ladder, that strengthens us, that stabilizes us, that prepares us for what awaits us at the top of the ladder, where we leave all form behind and step into what the Course calls the eternal formlessness of God. It is this pure interpersonal goodness that draws us toward the supreme good, the eternal good, the only good. I think there is such beauty in this way to God. Here is a path, the same path for the Bill types, a path for the Helen types, a path for all of us. So whatever your relationship with revelation may be, if the Course is your path, then this is your way forward now. This, giving miracles, is the essential course of action for you.